Great. So I think that this is a really interesting way of being democratic about the questions. So rather than who's got the hand up and shouts loudest, we've got all the questions on the app. They've been voted up. We're going to cover the top ones that we can. What we'll do, all the questions will get answered. We'll just, after the session, we'll all go through and just answer all those. So in the pack you get with the presentations, you get all the questions answered as well. But if I can get our superheroes up, who are now wearing T-shirts, but Daniel, Jos and Craig to come up on stage as well. It's great, I don't have to wear a T-shirt. Fluffy Waffle doesn't merit a T-shirt.
Where? I think I see them. Sorry.
So round of applause. So we should now get our questions up on here. Testing. Great, okay. So I learned huge amounts from those sessions, that real expertise and real detail. So we've got a bunch of questions. We're going to work our way through. But let's start with the top voted one. So Natasha asked Jos, how do you match online, offline UIDs, assuming difference?
Okay. So the principle behind the user ID is that it's not different, that you're able to make the connection. So it relies on you being able to identify the user, for instance, on mobile and in store via, for instance, a loyalty card. So that means that on the website, you would set the UID based on an ID you, for instance, have in your CRM. And that ID is also connected to the loyalty card number. So it's actually the same ID. And by having the same user ID online and offline, that connection is made.
Okay, great. Let me ask a supplementary to that before you. Is there more stuff coming down the line? This is a big question. We're finding ways of dealing with it. Is there more stuff coming, do you think, in the near future to help us get a better handle on cross-device?
But I think,
no.
Yeah.
The answer is no.
Finished.
Daniel answers.
Basically, I think it's really important that, if you as the website or the company owner can't identify the user, you can't identify the user. I mean, you should be able to identify. One example that you can do this even without knowing, for example, more information about the user. One of the examples that I like is, so I often buy at Banana Republic, and the website, one of the things that they do is that after you browse a few pages, they pop up with a coupon, right? And for example, when they pop up with that coupon, they could have, for example, the user ID, they could set the same user ID for the session on the website and the coupon, and then you go to the store with the coupon, and when the person scans the coupon, then you can merge the information, even without really knowing more about the user. You could merge and close the loop in that that purchase, online and offline. But if you don't have a way to link those users, you can't do it.
Okay. So I suppose what we're saying is the old ways with, we can track someone's secret with a cookie and whatever are disappearing. We now rely on having a bargain with somebody. If you tell me who you are, I've got some stuff that's worthwhile. So the Amazon thing I always love, I'm checked into Amazon the whole time because I want to buy something, it's one click, it's worthwhile. So it's actually finding smart ways of motivating someone to give you the data, isn't it, I suppose? Okay. So Jos, again, you haven't got a logged area of the site. How best can we show whether mobile does play a part in conversion? So that whole thing you talked about in those demonstrations, where do we go with that next?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's where things like the estimated cross-device conversions in AdWords come in, because it doesn't require a login on your specific websites. It relies on the Google login, and it doesn't cover all your traffic, but it at least gives you a sense of direction, at least helps you to kind of understand what the cross-device behavior is and to use that for budgeting decisions.
Okay.
Just one of the things that we were talking just before the event, we were looking at some data and discussing. So there is one way, for example, that you can use if you have a newsletter, right? And you don't really have a registration on the website or a sign-in, but people sign up for a newsletter that you send every week. And one hack that you can use is that if the person signs up for a newsletter, you can use that as an ID. And when the person clicks through from the newsletter, you can use this as the user ID. I think that's something, you don't have a registration, but you can somehow, learn a little bit more about the
And that's still permission-based, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
It's not less overt permission-based, but if someone calls you on that, I did it because you've signed up for my newsletter.
Yeah.
You feel good about that?
You're not being evil if you do that. That's okay.
Where do I get that from? Don't be evil. It rings a bell. Rings a bell. Okay. So Craig, just bear in mind, you can still ask questions now and vote them up, because Craig, gave us loads of great information. If you've got a question, you can add that now and we can get to there. But Craig, the minimum lasting time, number of observations on A/B testing, I know it's very detailed, but is there a sort of quick headline you'd sort of give for that?
Yeah, minimum 2 weeks, preferably 4 weeks. You should be looking at least 250, if not 350 conversions for each creative that you're testing. And remember, if you test stuff that's very similar, so maybe a button with dark blue and one with a slightly lighter shade of blue, you could be waiting months or years to get a significant result. But certainly, that's a good bottom baseline. Don't run for 1 week, right? Because you don't then have a week to compare against the next cycle. If the next cycle in a 2-week test looks nothing like the first week, there's something going on. Your marketing has changed, your response, your traffic, some rug has been pulled out from underneath you. So you need to run for a minimum of 2 weeks to compare. Most of the tests I'm running are considerably longer than that, but ultimately it depends on how bold you are with the test. If you try something really bold, right, it's going to get a big lift or it's going to have a negative reaction, right? So don't be timid about stuff and you'll get shorter test times, but never test for less than 2 weeks, please.
Great. So one for me, Dr. K in the house. Best practice companies quite young and flexible, larger, older companies with less flexible back-end systems. That's what we deal with a huge amount with talking to clients, because everyone knows a startup can be very nimble, get on and do things. We did work with financial services. They've got legacy systems that don't talk to each other, been there for 20 years, no one understands how they work, the plumbing's antiquated. And I think the thing that we've always talked about is you can't change a whole company, but can you find an individual part or something to focus on? So if someone in e-commerce looking at if you're trying to do loans and selling those digitally, just focus on one product and try and build a practice and case studies around the things we've all talked about today, on one small area. Then you've got some learning. You can then take it to higher up in the organisation and get it to change. We do some work about digital transformation, and there's lots of interesting models. So Walmart has a lab, which they put them in San Francisco. Walmart headquartered in Arkansas. You can't hire the talent you need in San Francisco. There's an English insurance company started up as a completely separate company with a separate P&L, separate team, separate offices to compete with them. There's a great quote from the guy who used to run GE. If someone's going to eat your children, it may as well be you. And I think, whilst it's fairly old, but finding ways of learning and being agile and nimble and quick in a small part of the organisation, you can take that into other parts of the organisation from there. So Jos, what percentage of users are tracked via Google services? And is that how representative are they of normal population?
Yeah, that's a question that comes up every time, and we're not sharing any percentages
You're amongst
around
friends.
that. They do differ a lot per country. I think a good proxy, at least for the mobile side of things, is to look at Android penetration, because people using Android tend to log in to Google, so that gives you a bit of a sense, but we're not sharing actual percentages. And then in terms of, do these users represent the normal population? So the whole extrapolation part takes into account, it's not just like saying, 30% is logged in, so if we then add 70% more to those cross-device conversions, that's where we come out. So there's a lot more factors playing in there, like things like location and so on. There's so much more there that goes into these estimated numbers. So we believe that it very much is a good.
This might be wrong, but if you look at your top line Google results, where it doesn't show the keywords they've searched on, that indicates they're a logged in user. So you can get a sense from there. If you're looking at a lot of users and you're not getting keywords showing, then they're logged in. So you can get a sense from there, can't you?
Yeah, I suppose that's quite a nice technique. Yeah.
Okay. Daniel, why do we have to provide a user ID if Google most likely knows which devices belong to a user?
Well, first of all, there is a difference between Google knowing and Google sharing with you, right? I'm just saying that there is a difference. But basically, there is a. First of all, there is once someone asked me about there is Chrome users and there is Android users and people logged into their Gmail account, and that's not shared between Android and Google Analytics or Chrome and Google Analytics. There's absolutely no sharing doors between those services. So that's one thing. So Google Analytics, we don't know that. So that's the answer. And I can say quite confidently that we are not going to do that. I mean, that's something, there are many implications on, doing those kind of merges, and I don't think that's going to happen. So, I mean, if you should, giving as, I think all of us said in our presentations is that you should be thinking very hard about providing the right incentives for people to sign in and to want to sign into your companies, because there are incentives that you can give them, and that ultimately will I think will be really good for you as well.
We wrote about the store conversions login when that was announced a couple of months ago, and made the point that there's a page on Google. If you go google.com location, if you've signed in, you should pick a date. It'll show you exactly where you were that date. And it happened to be a day that I'd been in California, and there was my exact journey. I'm the only person who got all the bus to Facebook, I think. But my exact journey, minute by minute. Yet, had I bought something, the data on that has to come from a sort of proxy group. You wonder at some point, getting people to check in, the whole Foursquare thing is a bit of a nonsense being a mayor. Can you get people to check into your store by incentivize a loyalty card or something like that? That starts to give you metrics, permission-based. You could close this loop, I suppose. But it's down to thinking, what could you do with your customers to supplement what Google's going to tell you? Because you're right, Google aren't going to start giving that information out, because someone in Brussels might find it a bit of an issue. Craig, one page or concurrently?
This is a very good question, Anthony. Where are you, Anthony? So I can avoid you later. No, it's a great question. This is something that people ask me about a lot. Somebody else asked a question about running simultaneous multiple tests on the same page or indeed on multiple pages of the site. If you've got analytics integration, yes, you can, okay? But to answer this one, the best way to test multiple hypotheses will really depend on how that stuff is grouped together. A/B test is great for, changing clusters of things that are the same. So an A/B test, changing all the payment logos and payment information on that page, is a good little cluster of things to try out. If I'm mixing a whole load of variables that could interact strongly or weakly together, let's say I'm changing the privacy policy and something to do with the payment and something to do with security, I'd need to run a multivariate test to decode that. But there's absolutely nothing to stop you running multiple tests that are all running simultaneously on the site, as long as you have analytics integration. So I could be running a test on the product page, on the basket page, on the first step of checkout, and on the payment page, and I can be running them all the time, but then I can actually decode which was the best converting chain. And the best converting chain was A on the product page, B on the basket, B on the payment page, and so on. So I can actually work out the chain of best performing creatives as a recipe. But there's nothing to stop you. People are often scared. They say to me, you can't run tests at the same time. As long as you're observing rules about the representativeness of your sample, does that really give you a representative sample of the kind of users and the point they're at in the purchase cycle and the traffic sources they came for? If the answer is yes, and you just got loads of traffic to a product page, nothing to stop you running 10 A/B tests on that page. You're just using different segments of traffic to do it. As long as you have enough sample, it's absolutely fine. Come grab me afterwards and you can show me what it is that you're trying to test, and I can tell you the best approach for it.
There you go, free consultancy. There you go. Let me ask Daniel, before I answer this next question to me, You showed all the different sources you can pull into GA, which is quite illuminating because I didn't know about all of those. What do you think are the biggest sort of potential data resources that are sort of underused by people?
Underused, I think email. Actually, I think email is one of really important things. And I always remember there is a really good presentation on Stanford from Dan Siroker. He's one of the founders of Optimizely, and he was on the campaign for Obama. I think 2012, 10, yeah. So one of the campaigns. And one of the things that he says is that how important email is and was for the campaign. It was the best thing that they did on the campaign. And I think that email is still a really, really important thing when it comes to reaching out to people. And there are lots of things that you can do, for example, to integrate your emails to your Google Analytics account. For example, to know how many people opened the email, which is something really interesting, and how many people came from the email. And as I mentioned earlier, I think merging, for example, your email system to Google Analytics so that you can use it as user ID. I think and I don't see lots of people doing that. And just one thing that I would like to say is that you don't send emails to Google Analytics because that's forbidden. It's one of the sins. It's sending emails to Google Analytics because it's forbidden by the terms of service. But you can use, for example, MailChimp ID if you use MailChimp or other email system. But I think the most underused data source today is email, to make better decisions and understand the customers.
An easy check there is just go to your Google Analytics, go to the All Pages report and type in the @ sign. Okay, if you see email addresses coming up in there, you've got a problem. Okay, it's a good little tip. You need to stop storing personally identifiable information.
But if you think about whatever, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, the root of someone's connection with there is always their email address. I think it's still, Seth Godin said it 12 years ago, getting someone's email address and permission is still the most valuable bit of data you can get from somebody. Because you've got that, you can start to get them across different channels to do stuff with them. I think it's much underrated. It's come back in fashion the way emails now, I think. Yeah. So I've got this question. This is the perennial thing that comes up, mobile apps or mobile web. Quite a lot of data around suggests that the vast majority of time on a mobile device is spent on mobile apps. And I actually don't think that's quite as accurate as people make out. Because if you look at that, within that mobile apps time is things like music, which used to be on my iPod or somewhere separate. Is gaming, might be somewhere separate as well. So you've got quite a lot of different activities bundled together. You've also got, if you look at the data, Facebook is a huge proportion of people's time, as we know. In most markets, it's a majority of time now. But if I click on a link or something in my feed, it sends me to a Guardian report or anything on the web, it still counts as Facebook. It actually is still the web. And I think that apps are very interesting. Getting an app downloaded is incredibly hard. Getting an app downloaded and used is incredibly hard. So you're not solving a real problem. I think having a mobile website that is really, really good is the first basic. Because from there, you can tell people, hey, you've got an Android device, we've got an Android app. It's a great way of marketing that. I would get that. I still think search is hugely important. And yeah, it's changing, whatever, but we still type into Google, huge amounts from there. So I would get a mobile app, a mobile website first, get that right. Then if you've got a really strong use case for an app, for existing customers we have a relationship with, then maybe you can get them to download it and do something from there. I would never do it in a different order from that. The people who tend to disagree with that, oddly enough, are app developers. Jos, cross-device conversion analytics. Let me build out from that. We've talked about a lot of really interesting stuff today, but I worry that it sounds a bit like I need a PhD to be able to use all this. Is there a way that our audience can sort of access this, get advice about this, and in a way that's easy to use? Because the danger is it looks fantastic, but I'm not ready for that. How do you make it available or accessible or easy to use?
Yeah. I definitely think that the easiest thing to use, again, is the estimated cross-device conversions in AdWords, because it covers so much. It doesn't require you to change code. It doesn't require you to talk to your developers, and so on. So I think that is That is an important thing. And the question is around, okay, are we then able to get these estimated cross-device conversions into analytics? I know we've been looking into this. The tricky thing there, though, is that the attribution logic between Google Analytics and AdWords is different, because AdWords will give credit to the ad click, no matter if that ad click was the last touch point of the user. And with analytics, it will give credit to the last actual touch point of the user. So if you then start importing conversions from AdWords, which are even then cross-device, estimated cross-device conversions from AdWords, then you have different attribution logics within one system, and then it gets even more complex. Yeah. You really need a PhD. So in general, I'd say the key thing for us is making this really actionable, because now I showed like these different columns and you can recalculate some of your traditional metrics and so forth, but where we want to get to is that you can actually optimize based on that, right? That you can optimize based on different attribution models from within AdWords, and that you don't have to do your own calculations and so forth. So I think that's the direction that we're heading, where you can just say, okay, I want to optimize based on this type of model.
Okay, so it's getting more accessible and easier.
Yeah, and definitely more actionable, because now it's still a lot of hypothesizing about what might happen, then doing certain types of testing, doing time series experiments and so forth, and that's of course not ideal, and you can't, ideally you would do it over and over and over, but in reality it's very tough.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of questions for Craig. I think Bob's been giving Craig some advice. Please can Craig be given a cardboard for being the most animated, enthusiastic presenter. But spell his name Nick U.
Thank you.
Craig, client data stored in using Google Analytics, cloud-based, compliance, financial services. What's the
I
answer
will probably
to that?
say something wrong here. I'm gonna ask Daniel to cover that one because I'm not the best person to answer that one.
So it's completely secured and strict, and there are several banks using, even in Europe, right, which is a very strict place. And I mean, if you look at even at the success stories on the Google Analytics website, you'll see that there are companies across all verticals in all countries using, and it's pretty secure, and in the cloud, I don't understand quite what you mean by, in the cloud. It's on Google servers, which are, backed up all around, and you won't lose the data or something. So I hope I answered the question.
There's a great story. I don't Target in the States. So Target is like a big supermarket in the States, and they got hacked, and 250,000 customer records were taken, email addresses, credit cards, or whatever. The CEO got fired, and I'm told that the week after that, suddenly security companies were talking at board levels at every company in the States just about. Because it used to be it's an IT problem, someone's hacked into it. And with Targets, when people realised this is valuable stuff and you have to protect it really carefully. So I think that whole thing of safety, obviously financial services is difficult, but a cloud is as good as someone's laptop that gets left on the train. Or, smart security works everywhere.
And I think, in terms of security, I think Google is in a pretty good place to protect the data from attacks and things like that. If of course there are stuff happening out there, but I think Google is still one of the most secure place when it comes to data. So.
Okay, so Damien's asked 5 minutes to pitch the value of attribution measurement to my CEO and finance director. What would you have said? This again comes down to, I think, the basic. What I was asking about, we've got some really clever stuff here. You guys are very smart at this stuff and know it, but I'm sure, you got to start to talk to someone on your board level, and they start to, they don't get what you're talking about. Worked on a bank, Halifax Bank. Client there was telling me he was having a conversation with one of the board members about 10 years ago, and talking about something, and the guy says, well, you would say that because you believe in all that stuff. And I do think that sometimes we're seen as like religious fundamentalists because we talk about digital the whole time. So I think the answer is, we're talking to the CEOs, you've got to talk in, business, benefits in terms of money, benefits in terms of customer service, and the way it gets done, the stuff we're all learning here, doesn't need to come out and get talked about. Because I think we do overcomplicate stuff. I think if you look at mobile, the biggest single reason it's taken a long time to get it, because it's got so complicated. Is it an app or is it a website? Is it Android? Is it iOS? How does it all work? I don't know anybody who understands how cathode ray technology works for a TV set, but you know, a good TV commercial. Yeah. We need to just lift out of the day-to-day and the detailed a bit. We need to know it to be good at this stuff. We don't need it to explain it to CEO and lose them from there. So business benefits. And again, the thing that I'm really excited about is mobile's a machine for making money. There's loads of people doing incredibly well, selling stuff at huge scale to millions of people using mobile devices. So it can be done now.
I think related to that, like if I look at my presentation and all the stuff I covered there, in general, when I would go to a client, especially if they have a loyalty thing, I just have my fancy gadgets with me and show them the one thing that I can link stuff.
Yeah.
And say, okay, now I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't care about how it works in the background, right? So
yeah. Testing stuff, that whole can you find a way testing stuff or demonstrating it?
Yeah.
You know, well, in A/B test, you know,
exactly.
we did this, we got this result. Can I have the money to do more of it?
Yes.
Basically, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Craig, here's a way to make yourself really popular with some of the audience. What internal structure does novice business need? Do most people need an agency?
The answer is no. And actually, a great deal of my time is spent these days working with clients, not to create reasons to charge them endless amounts of time for people who are paid less than me, but to actually teach them how to fish for this stuff themselves. And the thing I've discovered over the last 3 years is when I've taken that approach, people have said, yeah, but you'll be out of a job eventually. Once you show us how to do all this stuff, we won't need you anymore. But the thing is they move on in terms of strategy. In 9 months' time after they are successfully set up and running split tests and kind of get into the more advanced stages, start asking harder and harder questions. My clients mature with the time I'm actually kind of spending. So for me, you know, continually going down to the river to fish and then drag the fish to the village gets a lot easier if people come down with me, watch me fishing, and then I give them the bloody rod. You know, it makes it a lot better. So, and in terms of novice sort of stuff, you know, I've talked about a lot of things here in the deck that are real prerequisites. There's a heap of great resources, websites, books, and Twitter IDs that are all of practical use inside pretty much most of my recent slide decks. So if you go to SlideShare and look for Craig Sullivan, download one of those decks and it's got a complete pack of kind of all the reading you need to do. But if you're doing work on mobile, and in particular any optimization work around mobile forms, Luke W., who is doing the workshop tomorrow, he is the best guy on the planet at this stuff. I worship the ground that guy walks on, and I'm so excited about meeting him, I feel like a little girl, right? He's that good, right? I'll be, oh my God, it's Luke. So if I feel that way about that guy, he has immensely helped my career with his writing. So if you do any of that kind of stuff, you know, please go out and buy a copy of his book, Filling in the Blanks. It will make you better than most of the people you know at doing testing. Good tip there.
Okay. I've always worked in agencies, and I think that, you know, clients should have this stuff, a knowledge centre in-house, because they get better stuff from your agency. If you're giving this stuff we've talked about today to your agency, you're giving away core competence. The chances are they won't be able to do it as well as you can do it because they're doing other things from there. But if you've got the knowledge in-house, you can then get an agency to work with you and add real value by doing the things that, you know, you're less good at from there. So I think there's a compromise for both those. Yeah. But you have to have the skills in-house these days. It's too important. So Craig's asked me a question. Using data to predict things or set smart defaults for software. I don't think companies are doing too much of that. I think it is a great example that you can, you know, think about what someone might do, a use case, and work to that. But people are still, you know, relatively sort of early stages, I think, of it from there. So there's a great potential to do more with that. Daniel, page views, other Apple app analytics. What solution for iOS?
So if I gave that impression, I'm sorry. So basically we have, with Google Analytics, a pretty robust SDK, both for Android and for iOS. Just one example that I gave was just for Android, but I don't know, 95 or 99% of the capabilities there for iOS and for Android, and also for tracking campaigns and everything. So basically, you can do with both platforms, and it's a pretty robust, you know, solution for both iOS and Android.
Right. So Julian's asked, I think, a really interesting question. So, if you look at the mobile app market, advertising market, it's slightly distorted because there's a huge amount of VC money chasing app downloads. And one of the things we've talked with Facebook is that, one day might disappear and we might have a very different sort of mobile advertising market. But assuming this continues, how do you really sort of, what's the best things you can do for iOS and Android to measure who's driving what? Because that is the killer question for so many startups, isn't it? Where are my app downloads coming from? What am I paying for them?
Yeah, so you mean the Julian's questions?
Julian's question.
Compared measurement. So basically, as I mentioned in the presentation, it's really important to link the apps to analytics so that you can see, not only how many people are coming, but also things like in-app purchase, for example. You can track using e-commerce for mobile apps, and you can track ads. You can track everything that is happening, all the behavior, and not only the campaign success, but also lifetime value and other, continuous things for your mobile app. Not sure if I answered.
Craig?
To say one more thing, it's kind of a little bit tricky on iOS because Apple just make things needlessly harder and more filled with sand than they ever need to be sometimes. It's so annoying. But what you could do is, certainly if you're doing internal promotions on your site, like, hey, download our app, you take people to the app, they download the app, and then when they first run it, you touch a page back on your site saying, hey, I've just been downloaded, okay? Because the person visited earlier, clicked on your internal site advert to go and download the app, and then they came back again, you can recognize them as a download. Okay, you may not have all the kind of data points that you might get in an Android scenario, but it's perfectly possible to do kind of tracking here. I just think a lot of people make mistakes about kind of tracking too much data in apps rather than creating a kind of simplified structure, or they try and make it more like pages on a website when it's not really like that. But certainly that problem of tracking, it's a different scenario with iOS and Android, and Apple do make it harder, but it's possible to hack it a bit.
I think I'll just add to that. Again, this point, if you can't get, if your app proposition isn't strong enough to make someone want to sign up and identify themselves on it, it's probably not going to work as an app. So if you can get someone to sign in, you can then sort of, look back at what they've done elsewhere from there. It's interesting, we talked about Apple as fantastic design, brilliant company. The one part of the business that is terrible is the App Store. It's completely broken. It's impossible to find anything. How they haven't fixed that, I have no idea. I really don't understand that.
Don't mention iTunes.
We've got about a minute and a half left. So what I'm going to do is, I think we've answered quite a lot of questions. We're going to answer all of these separately and give you a note on that. We've got about a minute and a half left. We've talked about loads of things today. The danger with these things is you hear so much stuff, you write all the notes, and you go back on Friday morning, and there's all the work to be done. So I'd like to ask everyone, what one thing would you counsel all of our friends here to do on Monday next week to take action from what we talked about today? What one bit of advice would you give? Who would like to go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
I want everybody to add this column I showed, the estimated cross-device conversions, add that to your AdWords report. That's all. That's all. Because that gives you the insight. That tells you which ad groups, which campaigns are driving conversions across screens.
Okay.
I would like you and your team and everybody involved with your product to spend much more time talking to customers, listening to customers, asking them questions, understanding what devices they have, where they use them, what problems they have. You need to be more immersed in their world. Let's face it, you can get out the office and spend less time talking with your boring colleagues and actually get some really useful ideas for how to improve your product. Just get out of the office is my advice.
Get out of the office. Daniel.
I'll say buy my book, but since you gave me but I think you should, go to your Google Analytics account and look and check if you have a goal set, because if you don't, that's the single most important thing that you need on your Google Analytics account.
Okay. I'll say buy Daniel's book. I do think that, and also the reading that Craig talked about, there's a load of great knowledge out there, which is worth sort of getting and flicking through. You might not want to read every page, but you can get great knowledge from that. 20 quid in his book, you can make that back in 5 minutes, I would go. Yeah. If that's not the case, it'll give you your money back next year. My thing would be, think about the other people in your organisation who don't get digital in the way you do, and think about ways you can encourage them just to experience your business on the devices they use. They've all got an iPhone or a smartphone, they're all on Facebook. Get them to come to your business through that lens and get them to think about what works and what doesn't work from there. So we have the thing fit for mobile. Get them to go off and look at your own business from that lens of a consumer and see that helps from there. We're out of time. Can I just say thank you to the panel again?